is nutritious for the whole being of this individual, for the health benefit of this particular individual. So it looks at the total sum of activities that take place along the food chain.
Right.
And it also encompasses the inputs. It's not just the activities, but also the inputs that are being used in terms of production, processing, and what have you.
All aimed at ensuring that the safety of what we consume finally. Now, when we talk about food being safe, this is where I want to bring in Dr. Jagwe. What do we mean by food being safe for human consumption? Sometimes, as long as someone eats food and they are full, that is good enough for them, and they're thankful to the Lord that they have something to put into their stomach.
Well, my colleague Gertrude is a nutrition expert. I think she's best placed to handle that question. But generally, safe food is food that should not cause you harm. We know that there is malnutrition, and malnutrition it's a whole big thing. Safety now is part of that, and safety would refer to eating things that will cause you health problems, if we can make it that simple. And the biggest concern now is through the food system, as food moves from the farm to the plate, there are many chances for that food to capture bad things, if I can call it that. The way you harvest it, the way you store it, the way you process it, all those are entry points for bad pathogens or bad agents that can cause disease. And so safety is critical. Lately we've seen an example of aflatoxin infestation in maize especially. And how does that come about? It comes about straight from the field, by the way, through to how you're harvesting, when you're harvesting, and then how you're storing that maize. Then if all these are not handled well, then the Aspergillus flavus organisms enter the maize, and then they secrete those toxic substances that are linked to body conditions like cancers. And so food safety is also a very important thing that needs to be considered when we are talking about food systems. Thank you.
Gertrude, food systems are very important, but usually we find and we know that about 60% of our farmers here in Uganda are subsistence farmers. Only about 40 are in commercial agriculture. Yet, in one way or the other, what they produce ends up in the market. They may not be that very conscious of this food chain, food systems. Have we really prioritized this to the ordinary farmer, or is it about gaining better yields? Which maybe seeds give me better? How do I get markets? To what extent have we made this known to the ordinary farmer who feeds this nation and, of course, the lot that we export?
Maybe just, thank you, just to get the point clear or clarity, when you talk of 60% of Ugandans being subsistence, that means they're not commercial. We ideally wouldn't expect their food
because they have
to anywhere
and
it's from the garden. It's basically consumed at the household level. So in an ideal setting, we would assume that that food actually remains there. But in light of trying to ensure that that the food along that value chain, the food that comes at the end of the day to the markets that we go to and that we buy and take to our homes is safe. I find that they are, as government, of course, it's a challenge. It's quite a challenge for us in Uganda. But as government, at least there are those measures. When you look at the institutional structures, government has tried at least to put systems or institutions in place to ensure standards in terms of handling. We have a whole chain of government services in terms of agricultural extension services. in terms of community development officers at the community level who help in terms of sensitizing, training these particular communities or the targeted groups, the farmers, on how best to ensure that the food that they produce, apart from it being of high yields, apart from them being high yield, you'll find that they also go ahead to show them how best to handle them, post-harvest handling. I'll give an example of coffee. Remember, Uganda, we really, when you look at the coffee that we are producing, actually the volumes have grown. But some years back, I would say like 15 years back, the way it was being handled, you'd find people really basically pour it on the ground and have it sun-dried on the bare ground, which was not very good. But today, as you traverse the communities and what have you, find at least people now try to ensure that after they've harvested it, post-harvest handling, at least for drying purposes, at least they put tarpaulin and dry it on tarpaulin or raised surfaces and what have you. So all those measures that government has tried really to bring on board different actors, players, including the civil society, the development partners, and to really help in terms of ensuring that the food that we have at the end of the day is actually safe for consumption.
Well, also to draw more light and also let you know how very important food systems are for any country and also globally. The United Nations, that is the UN, in seeking, that is to ensure food security and safety, they have organized, that is what we call the United Nations organizing a food system summit, and this is going to be held in September. Now I want to also look at this and better understand, this is not the first of its kind. This is going to be the food summit of food system summit of 2021, meaning we've had previous summits regarding food. But let's also understand, first, of course, you tell us more about this summit, and of course you want to know how we stand to benefit. Now begin with Dr. Jagwe.
Thank you. The world is working on a plan, is moving on a plan, and that plan is encompassed in the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, and goal number 2 is zero hunger. And within that goal, the UN, being a global body, a global organization, is mandated to pursue these goals for the betterment of the world by 2030. All these goals should have been met. And so with the goal of zero hunger, that is when we are seeking to see that food systems are in place. They are sustainable, considering the environment in which we live, which is punctuated by a lot of shocks and stresses and uncertainties. Look at COVID, for instance, how it has changed everything, and the way we do things, the way we farm, the way we process, the way we move. And so those are uncertainties and stresses that need to be factored into the food system thinking. And then secondly, how equitable is food access and availability to people. And so with all this, the UN is running a series of dialogues, and these dialogues are to common people like you and me, to see that we start pulling all this thinking together. In Uganda, the office of the Prime Minister, actually the Right Honorable Prime Minister, is the national convener of these dialogues, and well represented by the office of the Prime Minister. And co-conveners in Uganda, They include the Ministry of Agriculture, the Minister of Agriculture actually, and the chairman of the National Planning Authority. So that entity of planning is part of this whole thing. So as we build up to this summit in September, the UN thinks it's important that views are listened to, views of an ordinary citizen. They are listened to. How do we make these food systems appropriate to ourselves and our conditions? So that is what it's all about.
And Mayanja, how are you going to capture the views of the ordinary person, the views of the farmer into these food systems, so that they are well brought into maybe the final communique or the final document at this summit?
The views of the farmers, the views of the farmers of the citizens of Uganda ideally are best captured in our planning frameworks. You realize that the planning frameworks are basically consultative, and they really mirror the face of the ordinary Uganda. That they really mirror the challenges of the ordinary Ugandan, and they are basically tailored towards transforming that very ordinary Ugandan. So in terms of approach, as government, we are basically looking at the overarching planning frameworks that guide this country. Specifically, we are looking at the National Development Plan 3. We are looking at the Uganda Nutrition Action Plan 2, and also the NRM Party Manifesto, which basically is the framework that that the Ugandan population really vouched for for the current government. So those are planning frameworks that we are basically looking at to basically ably capture the views of the ordinary Ugandan. So if we concentrated on the commitments that are already embedded in there, then we ideally will be capturing the views of the ordinary Ugandan.
Well, I'll go for a break, but when we return, we'll be discussing the opportunities that this summit is providing, that is for the ordinary Ugandan or the citizens, as we try to ensure that we improve food systems for the safety of the food we consume. We'll return shortly.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra. In chess, the small one can become the big one. It's the same here. And here too. Watch every move. Record every number so you can plan better. No matter the size of your dream, tomorrow's success belongs to those who keep today's records clean. File your returns today.
Uganda Revenue Authority, developing Uganda together.
Fellow Ugandans, you know that the current COVID-19 period is a trying time in our lives. However, we still have another threat that has been with us for a long time, and it is called neglected tropical diseases, also known as NTDs. NTDs include bilharzia and worms that cause swollen stomachs. Trachoma causes blindness, and elephantiasis causes the swelling of legs. These diseases are affecting millions globally, and yet they can be prevented by regular hand washing with soap and clean running water, regular washing of the face with a soap and clean running water, keeping dirty hands away from your eyes, always using pit latrines, and discouraging open defecation in your community to avoid flies that carry germs, reporting to the health facility early when feeling unwell. Remember to stay safe and protect yourself. This message is from the Ministry of Health with support from Ascend Project.
Echa COVID-19 chija kugwa. If we get vaccinated now, observe social distancing, wear masks properly, sanitize or wash our hands with soap and water regularly. Together we can defeat this enemy.
What does it mean to be closer together? It's taking the last bus home for a surprise visit. Closer together is strangers finding a connection. It's bringing home something much more than a box. It's the warmth of home, or the beginning of something new. There's magic in sharing the things that we love, because it's those things that bring us close together.
Has anyone seen Bob? Over here! How did you get Mastercard? But you don't even have a bank account. Well, it's not a card. It's virtual, so no plastic. What are you doing there? I want to buy Nancy birthday gift, book my flight tickets, renew my brother's shipment.
It's not a card, but works just like one. Get one on the Airtel Money menu on your phone.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Morning Uganda Extra.
Good morning, Uganda Extra. Thank you so much for keeping it with us as we look at that is food security, but to be more specific, we are looking at food systems, where this is the process from planting to you, the final consumer. How safe is this food? What are the machines? What are the chemicals used? Are they hazardous to your health or are they not? And in line of this, United Nations is organizing that is a food systems summit, with the aim of ensuring that they popularize how best we can ensure that people consume food that is safe throughout the chain, but also achieving the Millennium Development Goals of ensuring that we fight hunger and all people have food which is safe, which is nutritious for them to consume. And I have my guest in studios, that is Dr. John Jabwe, who is that's the country director or country manager Agra, and also Gertrude Namayanja from the office of the Prime Minister, and she's the principal policy analyst. Now we are looking at this summit. We know, of course, dialogues are now going on, but the summit is going to be in September. Let's look at the opportunities for the ordinary citizens of this country. Gertrude.
Yeah, the opportunities, like I mentioned earlier on, the opportunities are actually embedded in the approach, which approach is looking at the already existing commitments, government commitments, in the overarching frameworks that guide the development of this nation. So the opportunities are in terms of, I'll give an example of the National Development Plan 3, which basically looks at agro-industrialization. There's an agro-industrialization program. So under that agro-industrialization program, there are those interventions that are basically addressing issues of food production. They look basically at interventions of food production, and they go the whole way down to processing, value addition, issues of commercialization, issues of value addition, issues of prices, basically making our products competitive at the end of the day. And then you'll also, by making these products competitive, and you find that Uganda being a net producer of food, at the end of the day we are opening up our opportunities globally. You'll find that largely the rest of Africa is basically a net importer of food. So that way, when we take that direction, you find that as Uganda will be actually benefiting not only locally, but also internationally or within the region. Then the other opportunities are also embedded in in other programs. I'll give the programs related to sustainable consumption patterns, ensuring that this food, that production is basically sustainable. There is food. We wouldn't want to see a scenario whereby people are food insecure with no food. And here we are actually trying to explore opportunities. How best do we have food move from areas of surpluses to areas of scarcity? Uganda being a net producer of food, you find that there are those pockets where they don't have food. And when we talk of food, we're not just looking at food, but we are looking at those nutritious food, availability of adequate nutritious food at the end of the day for the ordinary Ugandan. So with this food system summit, it's basically helping us as a country position ourselves to focus based on those already existing interventions and programs, already existing institutions. One thing I want us to understand is that this summit is not basically bringing new things. These are already on board. As government, we already have the structures, the institutions, and what have you, to drive to ensure that the ordinary Ugandan at the end of the day has the food, the safe and nutritious food at his table. We have already government institutions in place. We have ministries. We have ministries plus their attendant departments and agencies that are basically geared to ensuring that there is food in the country. There is which food is actually safe and nutritious for the people of Uganda.
Well, I love
so in this way, we are basically this summit, actually the different dialogues that are going on actually give us an opportunity in terms of looking at what we have at hand, assessing what we have in terms of the already existing commitments, assessing them and documenting the achievements so far made, and also assessing where the challenges are and positioning ourselves better to addressing those challenges. So at the end of the day, we expect to be coming up with bold decisions in that direction.
We're talking about bold decisions. Good, you said there isn't, maybe it's all about ensuring that how do we perfect what we have in place and how do we address the remaining challenges. But I'll bring in Dr. Jagwe. We've talked about ensuring that people access food. Uganda, one of the things we boast about is being the food basket. One said you can even be the food basket of Africa. But aren't we opening up too much? We have surplus, but still we have pockets where people talk about Karamoja region. I was reading some statistics and they were putting about 40% of our food is being exported out. That is good, we earn revenue. But how safe is our population in terms of availability of food and safe food?
Thank you. I think food availability is part of food security, and it is factual that Uganda is a surplus producer of food. But that may not mean that every Ugandan goes to bed with a fed stomach, because of several reasons. One, there are areas, as you've rightly mentioned, which suffer distortions in rainfall patterns and also low rainfall amounts. Northeast of Uganda, we've known that area. So they intermittently get prolonged droughts, you know, and sometimes when the rain comes, it's also flooding, and the crops get destroyed. So that happens, it happens. And so, but at the same time, largely there are areas also, majority of the areas in this country have stable food production patterns, which enable us to produce surpluses. Uganda now, we all know we export a lot of grain, largely maize, to Kenya, to South Sudan. We export beans, maize to Congo. Our fruits and veggies are now also crossing borders, and these earn us revenue at the same time. However, we have also agencies and also the government, which looks out for those vulnerable areas through Office of the Prime Minister, and these areas are fed. So agencies like World Food Programme, UNHCR, working through coordination from the Office of the Prime Minister, ensure that those deficit areas are also catered for, because they are also suffering from these uncontrollable events or shocks that are beyond their control. And so that is the thing. But at the same time, we earn most of our earnings as a country from export of food items. Coffee is a food item. It earns us about $400 million a year, thereabout. Fish. We export a lot of fish. And then you go to the grains, you know, rice, maize, the beans, the pulses. And so that balance is okay. It's already there. And that is why I think we also forgot to mention that this Food Systems Summit has coined 5 action tracks of discussion. 5 action tracks of discussion, or 5 themes. We can call them themes of discussion. And each day, each theme is being discussed. From Tuesday, unfortunately, this program comes a little late, but this dialogue started on Tuesday. So Tuesday, one theme was discussed. Wednesday, another theme. Today, another theme is being discussed. And this gives our citizens an opportunity to air their views. How should we do things differently to ensure that food systems are sustained? And so, if you allow me, I can walk you through these 5 action tracks. The first one is about ensuring access to safe and nutritious food for all. And I think that's what we've generally been discussing. How does the population access food that is safe and nutritious? The second action track or a theme is shifting to sustainable consumption pattern. You know that consumption patterns keep changing, but how do we shift to what is sustainable? You know, people have been, the way we are consuming food is changing. Okay, we are more biased towards the rapid or fast food kinds of arrangements, you know, because we live in cities now. People live in cities, and that's why you see when COVID has come, the most vulnerable people are those in the urban areas, and that is where government is looking most for support, you know, to support rather, you know, Kampala, Mukono, Wakiso. You know, they don't have a garden, they run to harvest some tomatoes, some bunches of banana to eat. So because of that, urbanization, the most vulnerable have become the urbanites. And so that needs to be managed. Then the other theme is nature positive production. By this we mean, how do we produce and still not affect our environment, our environment?
Because we are cutting down forests.
Exactly.
For us to set up gardens, forests, sometimes for sugarcane.
Yes,
plantation.
but also we are cutting them down to build, to set up shopping malls, to build residences, to build shops, you see. So we are reducing, we are reducing cover, environment cover, tree cover, for instance, to do construction, and it takes time for these trees to grow back and then sustain our environment. And so how do we produce food sustainably without harming the environment? That is also another theme that is, it will be discussed. And then the fourth one is equitable livelihoods. You know, like we've just mentioned, we can keep singing that Uganda is a food surplus food producer, yet you'll find people going hungry in Uganda. So how do we make sure that there's equitable livelihoods, that those that earn from agricultural production, these earnings are well distributed in the population. We've known the stories of, the other day when I participated in a dialogue, I gave a story of Busoga region. Busoga region has been producing sugarcane for as long as we've known,
yes.
you know. But then the recent statistics that came out pointed to the region as one lagging very low in poverty terms. So you keep wondering, okay, what is this relationship about? Who benefits from sugar production? You know, how does the ordinary Musoga who's cutting that cane, planting it, benefit from all this? So we are talking about equitable livelihoods. So these are the discussions we want to have and conversations. And then whatever discussion agrees upon goes into the summit and say, look, maybe our farming models need to be improved, you know, instead of having one big guy who dictates the price and all these small people who are growing the crop are not benefiting. Then we say, okay, we are doing agriculture, but then the peasant is not benefiting.
Huge investors come in,
exactly,
and they're benefiting. This is where I want also to bring in Gertrude. Gertrude, we've had a number of summits. This is not the first. We had 2020, a summit still regarding food systems. But the biggest challenge and what we want to know, and also our viewer wants to know, really, what is the impact of these summits? You've talked about have a national development plan. Some of these have been put in place. We usually have communiques, documents, recommendations. Some we've even seen summits where you've had commitments, government committing themselves to some of these declarations, outcomes of these summits. Have we had really an impact when it comes to looking at food systems summits, the previous ones we've had?
I really don't know what impact you're trying to look at, but in terms of impacts, like I'm telling you, this is actually like, it's a UN event. And as Uganda, we are basically, being a UN member state, we are just driving towards our participation and coming up with bold decisions in light of already the non-government commitments.
If you look at the previous summit on this, as we give in our input and we participate in these summits, have we had a level where we come up with a UN agreed position that all member states also come to this? This is now what we should focus in, and have we implemented that?
In terms of focus, in terms of focusing, the focus remains, you focus, but again you find that it should be localized. We focus in terms of our local capacities and abilities. That's why we remain, and we basically emphasize the need to stick to already our own. And like I earlier on mentioned, you realize that the summit is not something that's bringing anything new in terms of the Ugandan context. All these have already been there. We have the systems, the structures, and the institutions. And for us as Uganda, we are basically looking at what we have, what is it that we have, what is it that we've planned to do, where are we at, and basically we are just documenting our situation, the Ugandan situation in terms of food systems, and then basically seeing how best can we position ourselves into the right direction and getting what the desired goal in terms of food systems. So basically you find that at that global level, it's basically countries coming out and showing their agenda towards the SDG 2. This is an event in line of the Sustainable Development Goal number 2, which is geared towards zero hunger. Strategy towards zero hunger. So in terms of Uganda, we are looking at how have we positioned ourselves as Uganda towards that, the strategy of achieving zero hunger.
Talking about achieving zero hunger, we are in a time of lockdown. And this is our first put to Dr. how do we ensure that Ugandans, we can't handle food and live without discussing this? Really, we still have people access food that is nutritious, that is available to them, and above all, that is safe.
Yeah, that's now the question on everybody's mind, especially as I've mentioned, the urban population is most vulnerable now because they have no means of producing food physically. And so we've seen that government is coming up with a strategy of giving cash on the assumption that food is available for purchase, okay? And also, gladly, the lockdown measures have allowed that food keeps moving. You know, people with pickups keep moving. People with farms can still go to their farms, and that has been allowed to continue. However, for food to move, you need to have means of purchasing it. So that's what we call access, the means to acquire this food. It may be available, but you may lack the means. And so it's applaudable that government is coming up with these means of providing, let's say, money through people's phones for them to purchase the food. However, there are lots of questions about that, and I hope answers will be obtained and the mechanism worked out properly so that the real vulnerable people are targeted. And then secondly, of course, this also gives us new thinking. From last year's lockdown to now, I think things have changed. Many of the corporate people have really understood the importance of food production. And so people sitting on a lot of idle land have started thinking on how to utilize this land and produce. You know, how can 2 rain seasons go by in a year and there is vacant land with bushes? You know, I think that is totally unacceptable in today's world. And so I think people should be encouraged to utilize all the vacant lands they have up country to produce. And minimum, if you can't produce in that land, at least plant trees, okay? Plant something, trees and forests that should sustain the environment. And so Uganda is a blessed country with 2 rain seasons, with largely good soils. And so there shouldn't be a reason why a Ugandan should grow hungry at any one point, even with these shocks and stresses, which is action track number 5. How are we prepared for these stresses and shocks? Okay, so in this action track number 5, these are the discussions that are to be held. Yeah.
Well, 5 things there that are being discussed at they're dialoguing at regional level. We hope these will greatly shape the future when it comes to safe foods that are safe right from planting and the entire food chain. Gertrude, let me have your final remarks that is regarding the summit, but also to Ugandans when it comes to ensuring that we have a safe food chain for us to consume.
Thank you very much. My final remarks in terms of ensuring that towards the summit to all Ugandans is basically to encourage them to follow on the issues, the different interventions that are entailed in the National Development Plan 3, the NRM Party Manifesto, and the Uganda Nutrition Action Plan 2. Those interventions that are basically targeted at addressing nutrition-related and food security interventions. So as Ugandans, we should really, Ugandans and the whole development world at large should actually interest themselves in supporting government efforts in that direction. Because these are basically the planning frameworks that are guiding us in that direction. And you realize that actually the aspirations under the Food System Summit, the 5 tracks that my colleague here highlighted, are basically well aligned. They are in sync with in regards to those development aspirations. So moving in that direction, and Ugandans and the development community at large basically supporting government in that direction will be in position of ensuring that the food systems in Uganda are actually up and running for the good of the Ugandans, for the good of all Ugandans, and for their transformation, basically.
Well, I want to thank you so much. That is Gertrude Namayanja, who is the Principal Policy Analyst, Office of the Prime Minister, and Dr. John Jagwe, the Country Manager, Agro Uganda, with whom we've been discussing that is food security, but most of focusing on the food systems. Well, there's so much that you should interest yourself in knowing. Where the world is heading to, it will not only you having huge productions, but how safe is the food for people to consume. Recently, we saw how our grain, the maize, had challenges accessing market because the focus wasn't entirely on safety of food. Have a lovely day. Till tomorrow, same time, God willing. Keep it on UBC TV, and above all, stay safe. COVID is real, but we have hope because we know how we can prevent this. See you tomorrow.
Live from UBC Studios.